Welcome to the show. I'm Judge Andrew Napolitano. I'll be talking to Geraldo Rivera about freedom right after these items from our Freedom File. This weekend, the United States turns 234 years old. The 4th of July is not the anniversary of the geographic discovery of America, nor of the Pilgrims' arrival, nor of the invention of fireworks. It's the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, which declared this land's separation from a monarchy, our right to resist an oppressive government, and the root of our freedom in inalienable individual rights. Happy birthday indeed, America. Unfortunately, now your fate may be decided by gatherings of politicians, not just from this country, but from other nations, like those in Toronto last week for the G20 Summit of World Leaders. 20,000 police turned the streets of Toronto into virtual holding cells, fighting small armies of protesters, most of whom were demanding even more government intervention in the global economy. Some of the protesters call themselves anarchists, a movement whose slogan used to be "Smash the State." It seems like nowadays they're a lot better at smashing storefronts and bank windows. Give me the kind of revolutionaries who left us with a free country, not the kind who create chaos and destroy property. One man who's been vocally exercising his right to free speech for over 4 decades is my first guest, my Fox News colleague and longtime friend, host of Fox News' Geraldo at Large, Geraldo Rivera. Geraldo, welcome here. It's a pleasure.
Judge, it is delightful to see you presiding from this bench.
Thank you. Where do our freedoms come from? Do they come from the government or do they come from our humanity?
I think the inalienable rights concept is from our humanity. And I think that from the very beginning, the best prospered, and to the extent that they had extra and they were so inclined, they took the others along with them.
The First Amendment doesn't grant freedom of speech. It prevents the government from interfering with freedom of speech. If the First Amendment were repealed, would we still have the natural right to speak freely, no matter what the Constitution said?
Well, it's interesting. You have a natural right, certainly, but I think we both agree that in the vast, majority of the globe, to try to exercise that natural right might be something that will put you in grim peril.
But we still have the right to speak, no matter what the government says.
Yeah, right and opportunity, I guess, are different, but yes, certainly, and I encourage it, except, my 4-year-old, when she's talking to me and I say it's bedtime, and she says, "No, Daddy, it's not."
All right, you're not the government. You're the government in that house, but you're not the government.
I am the king, the president.
Can the government tell us what to put into our bodies in the privacy of our own homes?
Well, the government clearly does, and, I think that it is one of the great examples of government failure. I've been covering the war on drugs, I think, longer than any currently serving reporter. This is my 40th year. So I chronicled the entire war on drugs that Richard Nixon invented in 1971. I have seen vastly north of $1 trillion in federal tax money expended on the law enforcement model of drug enforcement that has not worked.
I don't think anybody disputes that it's been a failure in terms of the loss of life, in terms of the loss of liberty, in terms of the loss of tax dollars. But from a moral point of view, from the natural right of human beings who own our own bodies, don't we have the right to put whatever chemical we want into our own bodies in our own home, as long as no one else is harmed by that?
But the last phrase of what you said is a giant conditioner. I mean, there are children there. There are others affected by your recklessness.
Well, that's the same as when you have a cocktail at dinner. There are children there.
I agree, and I think that they are of a kind. Now, in my view, the morality of it is something that's deeply personal. As long as it affects you, I mean, on the conditions that you describe, I certainly would legalize vastly all drugs and ask only that people give their own internal informed consent.
Even Governor Sarah Palin, when she was here, said she's not in favor of legalizing recreational drugs. She's in favor of the police not prosecuting people for that because they have better things to do.
Governor Palin had it exactly right. I mean, cops have a lot better things to do than sniff at your window, see if you're smoking a joint while upstairs watching the NBA play.
You have been in favor of the right to use marijuana in one's home, have you not?
I am, and continue to be, absolutely.
Have you ever used marijuana?
I not only have used marijuana, but I think I have the distinction of having used marijuana on international television.
Have you used marijuana on set on another network before you were here at Fox?
Yes, I have, Your Honor. Now we
know the statute of limitations has expired.
That's right.
When and where was that?
I had my groundbreaking show, pre-Letterman, pre-Saturday Night Live, called Good Night America on the ABC network. And NYU was doing some experiments. In those days, it was much more liberal than it ultimately became during the Just Say No era. And there I was, and I went down to NYU, and in an environment I think that could be arguably, or at least argued to be legal, I did a doob.
I don't know if the world knows that you are truly as libertarian as you're telling us today that you are.
Well, I am. I mean, libertarian in a vast way,
in a sense
but not
of,
an absolute.
In a sense of, I want to be left alone. In that sense.
I think that there is a right to choose in terms of abortion, to get to something far more, I think, controversial than drug use. I think there is a right to choose, but there has to be certain limitations based on science. I think Roe v. Wade was a good decision.
All right, I don't want to talk about abortion because we'll be here all day.
Right.
But you have the right to choose to put what you want into your body and your house.
You do under the conditions that you describe, but not all drugs are created equally, Judge.
All right.
For instance, do you have a right to commit suicide? You know, I guess you do, but I worry about.
Do we own our own bodies, Geraldo?
We do, in general, broad strokes, absolutely, Your Honor. And
I want to switch gears because we have a time limitation. Last week on this show, Congressman Dana Rohrabacher, conservative Republican from Southern California,
good guy.
We both know him. He was once a speechwriter for Ronald Reagan. Told us that he had said previously in another forum that all Republican members of the House of Representatives felt that the war in Iraq was a mistake. I may have mischaracterized what he said as immoral or illegal, but he didn't say that. He said the war in Iraq was a mistake. If he's right that others believe that, how could that be? How could there be such a sea change in the thinking of those who most ardently supported the war when George Bush asked for it, that they now think it was a mistake?
Well, Judge, you know that once you start the drumbeat and once you invoke the words like patriotism, it really obscures people's individual judgment, and I think it really does divert them from their own principles. I remember my misgivings about Iraq in 2003. Why? Because I had been in Afghanistan since 2001.
Right.
And in Afghanistan, when the war broke out in Iraq, I could sense that the attention we were paying to Afghanistan was shifting, and against an enemy who had nothing to do with 9/11. And I thought that the jingoism and I think it really. I think that patriotism can often be the last refuge of scoundrels.
Okay, that's a phrase with which they're all familiar. Do you now think that the ferocity of the war with which it was fought was a mistake? Do you think our presence there was a mistake? Do you think we should have gone into Afghanistan more aggressively?
Judge, I've been around so long. I don't second guess history. I really try. I try my best not to. I hope that Iraq ends up okay. I have seen the sacrifice. I have pictures on my wall in my office of me and dead soldiers that their parents send me after they're gone.
Before I let you go, after you finish this segment, a little later on in the show, we're going to talk about nullification. Tom Woods' book, great book, arguing that the states can nullify unconstitutional federal laws. Do you think the states have the right to do that?
I think that when you get down to what states can or can't do, Chris Christie's doing the best job of anybody in this country right now. I love
talking about the governor of our home
state of New Jersey. I like what Schwarzenegger did about the top two finishers or the people who run for the finals. I like what David Paterson, our much disgraced lame duck governor in New York, is doing in terms of nullifying these union deals that are so usurious.
But if the feds encroach on fundamental liberty, can the states nullify it?
Well, isn't that what the court is for, to judge that?
Suppose the federal government limited the number of, I'm just going to come up with a crazy hypothetical here, Hispanics that can live in New Jersey. Could the legislature of New Jersey say, forget about it, we're going to let all the Hispanics
social engineering is the worst thing the government can do, generally speaking, although I think that Rand Paul was wrong to say the Civil Rights Act should not have been passed in terms of what its impact was on the private sector.
All right.
I think that he gives much too much credit to the good nature or the good sensibilities or conscience.
All right, this is
of private business.
where we deviate. You're more in favor of the federal government regulating behavior on private property, whereas I'm more in favor of the free market.
If you characterize it that way, which I don't think is exactly the way I might.
Geraldo Rivera, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
I love you, Judge.